You're listening to the Practical Wealth Show with Curtis May.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Practical Wealth Show. And so I have I'm excited. Actually, I have a great guest today, Mr. Blake Templeton. And so he's the author of the upcoming book, The Solomon Way. So Blake's mission is to help accredited investors activate their net worth by teaching and providing them the way to follow the ancient secrets of the first trillionaire. And so Blake is an international motivational speaker, author of the new book, The Solomon Way, an 8-figure award winner and a regular contributor to Forbes Business Council. But what he's really excited to share with you today is the investment secrets found in his book, The Solomon Way, are making money for investors during this recession. That with 14 years in business and 300 plus transactions, not one single investor has ever lost money. That's important, guys. And in his private investment firm, this is unheard of. And so they are now on track to have $100 million under management within the next 12 months. And hey, I'm excited to hear about your new book, The Solomon Way, how you discovered and personally used these secrets to create a track record where no investor has lost money. Blake, tell me what I didn't tell him, and tell him what Solomon you're talking about. Let's go there, because they all don't read the Bible.
Okay, Curtis, I appreciate you bringing him on the show as well. This is King Solomon in the Bible, man. This is back 3,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I started in business, I was a college dropout without a penny to my name back in 2006. And I knew I wanted to own my own business some way, somehow. I paid a multimillionaire, persuaded him to pour into me. He said, give me a lot of money. I went to Wells Fargo, got a lot of money. Back then they'd give you money. And
Mm-hmm.
I just gave it to him. And I burned the bridges behind me. I actually started in real estate, doing flips and wholesaling, and built a huge business doing that. But long story short, I was making way too much money for where my capacity was, for my ability to actually handle and manage that kind of money. And so I was in my early 20s, and God set me down. It was just like, come to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally just said, man, I have so much for you that I want to give you. I've allowed you to build lots of wealth in real estate. I was making almost $1 million a year just as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what happened was I had become so prideful and arrogant, and I was doing it all in my own methodologies. I was doing it all in my own abilities. And he just literally gave me this ultimatum. I had 8 properties that I was doing full remodels with 8 different construction companies, wholesaling houses. I had about 40 in the pipeline. And I was typically closing about 5 a month. And then I was speaking on stages, selling basically this business in a box and how to do this,
Mm-hmm.
bringing in, $60,000 to $70,000 a month net profit. At this time, this is in 2009. And long story short, out of nowhere, the banks decide, you know what, we're going to actually call a timeout and not short sell properties anymore. So all of a sudden, Curtis, all my inventory starts going to foreclosure. I had a 93% success rate. And so everything starts going to foreclosure, all my properties that I was fixing to wholesale. And then the bank calls and tells me that my 8 properties that I'm doing remodels on, it says the bank's not doing good financially. The bank's going to go under. So we're going to call all your notes due.
Wow.
And you need to pay all those off in cash. And then on top of that, this is the business that I'm trying to sell people, on stage and how to do it. And now the national banks are not doing short sales. So my whole entire world just stopped immediately, and God got my attention. And
I would say
literally,
so.
I was to a point where I was still trying to spin the wheels. I had no credit when I started. Now I got 800 credit, and I've got all the money in cash, but not enough to pay these 8 properties off in cash. I go to try to get refinances. 8 banks say, yeah, we'll refinance it. Then they see that they're in pre-foreclosure because the bank, sent them to pre-foreclosure, and then they decided they wouldn't refinance them. And I found myself laying prostrate on my living room floor, like, just come to Jesus. Like, man, the pain is so great. Like, God, whatever you have to do, like, I don't want this stuff anymore. You can have it. I'm sorry. Like, I want to truly live for you now. And it was like the Lord told me, Curtis. It was like he said, we could have done this a whole different way. You didn't have to go this way. You could have just aligned with me. And so fast forward the next day, the bank calls me back and is like, hey, you can keep all those properties, just pay down a little bit and we'll refinance them. And it was like this, God literally I just had to commit. So that sent me into the Bible. That sent me back into 3,000 years into the middle of the Bible in First Kings, looking at King Solomon. And he was the first trillionaire, Curtis. He was the guy that established everything correctly, had sustainable wealth, built the largest empire. And I said, man, I got to go study this guy. And that's how it all started. Now we've done 14 years later, we've followed his methodology of how he built business, and have done 300 plus transactions, and not one single investor has lost money.
Wow. So see, you know what? I like to talk to people I know people that are like, I'm thinking of an individual right now that I know that thinks he's like king of the world, and is too arrogant. And, I don't trust people that have never experienced a loss. Right.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
you've got to lose, because it's not winning. Winning's not easy, but I really respect somebody that was winning, lost it, and came back. Right. Because a lot of times your self-esteem is tied to your net worth and your income. When you begin to lose all of that, what's really interesting to me is the mental toughness and the mental journey you had to take to pull yourself back up out of that hole, out of what Garrett White calls the pit, right? And that transformation is, so talk about that. And then because in the other part, let me just say it out while I have it in my head. Most of the Bible talks about money, but nobody sees that.
Yeah.
Let alone let's study Solomon. And what are the business lessons out of that? So that is absolutely fascinating to me, especially I went to Christian high school and 2 years of Christian college. All right. So, and nobody ever showed me that. So I was like, I'm all ears.
Well, and that's the thing is like no one talks about King Solomon in the picture, like how did he really do it?
Yeah.
And, it's basically a 3-dimensional investment, and I'll lay it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And my book, The Solomon Way, is literally the blueprint of the entire process, A to Z, of how you actually walk out a Solomon investment as a Solomon investor. But it's a 3-dimensional investment. And what that means is that when Solomon was becoming king, God asked him, what do you want? He actually, laid sacrifices on the altar, and he's like, man, I want to surrender to you. I want this kingdom to be a kingdom of peace, and I want to rule and reign for God, for his glory. And God said, okay, what do you want from me? And Solomon said, I want your wisdom. I want your wisdom. Could have asked for anything, power, money, but he asked for wisdom. And God said, it says, God was pleased that he asked for his wisdom. And he said, because you asked for my wisdom, I'm going to give you wealth and honor. And so the first dimension of your investments is it has to be God directed. It has to be in God's wisdom. So how we run an investment firm like that, and millions and millions and millions of dollars per transaction, is that, we might have, done 3 months of economic indicators and due diligence on a, $20 million investment. And all of our economic indicators might say like green light, green light, green light, this is a good investment. But if I don't feel the wisdom of God, if I don't feel the peace of God on that investment, I can't move forward on that investment. So dimension number 1 is you got to have the wisdom of God. And in this unprecedented time in our investments, everyone wants and needs the wisdom of God. So that's the first dimension. Second dimension is it's got to be tangible. For those listening, if you still have an arm or a leg in the stock market, like you still got something lingering in the stock market, it's a paper investment, and it's really what we call net worth less. When right now,
I like that.
how the stock market used to be, how it used to be was it was actually, if you bought some stocks, you actually owned a piece of the company. You actually owned interest in the company, and you obviously got cash flow off the company. Well, now 50% of the stocks in the stock market don't even have a dividend, and none of the stocks are fully correlated to the actual business. Meaning, the stock market price is going up while the GDP of the companies is going down. Like, nothing's correlated. It's all quantitative easing propping it up. So it doesn't hold real value. So the second dimension is its tangibles. So real estate. So Solomon was really big in construction. Solomon was really big in business. Solomon was really big. And so what we say as a Solomon investor is it's the land and the actual trade. And then the third dimension is it's the business that cash flows on that land. And so when you think about it with that mindset, God directed its tangible land with the improvements, and then the business that runs through it. So it always cash flows. And so that's what Solomon did. That's how he became the wealthiest man, the wealthiest king in his day. The first trillionaire of all times is he actually walked out what we call three-dimensional investments.
Wow, that is powerful. And so when we talk about quantitative easing, I just want to say, because one of the things that we talk about is I told people, like, I want to help people build tangible asset portfolios, because rich people invest in things. They don't invest in, because there's no honest pricing in the equity markets. It's really not investing, it's speculating. You're gambling. And so, if you seek, that's why I was reading, I have this book called, not to compare it to, but The Joy of Compounding, which is they're studying Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they read 3 hours a day. And then what happens when you read so much, you start to see the dots connecting, right? And then you start seeing opportunity, and then they focus on the business that throws off cash flow. So you start success leaves clues. That's powerful, what you did. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you just said, which was about, a Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. Here's the thing that people miss is they say, follow their way. Well, here's the thing. They're actually doing what we would do in the private market. So they're in the public market, stock market, let's call it the public market, and the real estate and business world, let's call it the private market. You can't go into the stock market and play by the rules of Charlie or Warren. You can't go there because they're actually playing by the rules of the private market. They're buying big companies. They're actually buying the majority of a company. If Bob goes in with 50,000 or 500,000 or 5 million, he doesn't own anything because he only the majority owner in the stock market would actually have any say. So all the wisdom that he's walking out in the public market, all the rules of staying for the long haul, all those rules, they only work for everyone else in the private market. So what you had mentioned about speculating, he's not speculating.
Absolutely
because
not.
because he has the majority ownership. But unless you have the majority ownership, you are speculating.
Yeah.
And so that's why you and I go to the private market, and Solomon investors, they invest in three-dimensional investments like Warren Buffett in the private market. And that's how we make these big returns.
Tell them what the private market is. I don't want to take for granted they understand. So what's the when you say the private market, you don't have to go to the stock market. These are like, tell them what they are. I want to hear that.
Yeah. So the private market would be everything outside of the stock market. So the stock market is, we'll just call that the casino.
Yeah, and the big casino. That's what I call it. Yes.
The private market is where you actually take control. Where in the Solomon way, I call you forward, call you up to be a king and to take ownership, take control of what God's given you. And you would then put that in the private market. And so the private market investments for Boron Capital, for my firm, is in funds that are diversified in real estate. So it might be in wedding venues that are crazy cash flow machines. Could be in self-storage. Could be in corporate housing. So we have high cash flowing properties that we put in a fund. And you're talking about the compound effect. That's what we do, is we focus on what we call an ATM machine. And it pays out 8% fixed, but it's compounding. And so if someone put in $100,000 in today, and in 30 years, you play the long game, it compounds every single year for 30 years, you'll end up having $1 million. It'll have doubled 10 times. And the actual rate of return annually is 30%. 30% return, 30 years would make $100,000, $1 million. And that's what we do all day long for our clients. And so my firm goes and runs the investments in the three-dimensional investments. So we go in the private market in three-dimensional investments, and we allow you to just put money into those investments. And all day long, you're just letting that thing cook. I'll take, for instance, like Ray Dalio. He is the largest hedge fund manager in the market, 160 billion. He has something called the all-weather portfolio. I took his portfolio. This is the best guy in the industry, the best of the best. I took his portfolio, put it up against ours. And since 2007 to 2020, their average return was 7.41%, the best guy in the industry. And ours is 8% fixed. And the way we can do that is because it's a constant in the private market. The public market's all about emotional pull. The private market's about tangible reality.
Right.
The public market's on speculation, like you said. The private markets is on the actual constructive truth. And so, man, that's what it is. It's about building ATM machines that can produce wealth for you 24/7, 365. It's just so funny. The rules of Warren Buffett are ludicrous for someone to go in the stock market and try to play them, because he's playing by the private market rules. So he says, number one rule, don't lose money.
Right.
Well, that's a joke for someone going to the casino, but for someone in real estate, in a tangible three-dimensional, that's got to be three-dimensional, because that first dimension is everything. God directed, the wisdom, because some investments look like they're good investments, but they're not actually good investments. So you have to have the wisdom of God, but you can actually not lose money in three-dimensional investments. And that's how in the last 14 years, through the 2008 crisis, through the 2020, unprecedented crisis, not one single investor's lost money. And man, the Solomon way is how we've done it.
How could our listeners out here kind of model King Solomon's, the way he built this financial fortress as, so let's say some of the people, are a good fit to invest with you guys, but let's just I like to, success leaves clues. So I hear that and I'm going, all right, as I build my business or look into the marketplace, any words of wisdom for how people should be looking at the opportunities that out in the economy, and kind of having, because to me, you got to have what I call your money rules. Of as you're going forward, I always tell people it's principles, there's strategies, and there's tactics, but most people don't have any principles,
right,
about how they approach it. So you just named, 3 principles, right? Wisdom, which, I equate to due diligence, tangible, so a real thing that you can touch that throws off cash flow. That's a rule. Those are like principles. As you're evaluating what you want to invest in. So how can I take that as a as a, I'm growing my portfolio. I've got, 8 or 9 properties. I've got a small business.
Right. Yeah, let me throw out some rules. So these are what I call 3-dimensional private rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You got public rules of the game, but these are the private rules of the game. This is where Solomon stayed. This is where he made the $1 trillion. This is it. So when you invest, you have to know the rules of the game. That's the key. There's rules for every game. You got to know what game you're playing. And when you have money that you're investing, when it's not collateralized, that means it's not tangible. So the tangible value isn't there. So it's got to be actual collateralized. It's got to be tied to the actual tangible. Everything in the public market, the stock market, obviously is not. Next rule is the rules of the public market. So everything that a financial planner might say, it doesn't work in the stock market, but those are part of the rules of the private market, like stay in for the long haul, double down. Like that would actually apply on tangibles. In the public market, that's the emotional speculative game. So it's the get in, get out, trade quick, move fast, aggressive movements, a lean heavy, spring quick. Like that would be the public market. And so the private market, the tangibles, the real estate, unless you own the game, unless you own the real estate, you're just playing by the rules of somebody else's game. So that's what we do in 3-dimensional investments. We own the actual tangible, know what your upside is, know what your downside is. And the quality question is, can I live with the downside? What's my upside? What's my downside? Can I live with the downside? If you did that to the stock market, can I live with, the loss of everything? And obviously the answer is no. And so next, I guess a final rule I would say is you got to actually begin the compounding of your investments. Everyone wants to live the higher lifestyle and take the income today, but 10 years later, you sure wish you would have actually lived off less and started compounding in your investments, because you would have had 10 times the amount of money. So, for instance, we have in our 3-dimensional investments, we have the ability for you to stay in your fixed rate return 8% and just get that mailbox money every single month. 8%. But you could do that, or you can compound that 8%. And like I said, whether you stay in the 8% compounded for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's kind of irrelevant. It just depends on what age you are and what you want to do. But the picture is a 30-year run is taking the amount of money you have and literally turning that 10 times. So if you had 100,000, that'd be $1 million. If you had 50,000, that'd be 500 grand. So it's taking that mindset that the best of the best, the wealthy people, can make 30% on their money, and that's been only for the uber wealthy. And compounded 8% 3-dimensional investments like this have brought this down to the regular old Joe. Johnny with 50 grand, he can actually participate in something that was never ever available in the past, and that's the Solomon way.
Okay, we love that. So as we release this, the book will probably be out the following week. Tell them about the book.
Yeah, so the book, this is my pride and joy. I've had so many people over the years say, one, how have you not lost money when everyone else in real estate's lost money? Everyone else in their businesses have lost money. How clearly everyone in the stock market's lost money. How have your investors not lost any money? And they're still making 8%. They're still making money when everybody else is losing money. It's one thing just to break even, but now it's a whole nother to make money. And so that's what the Solomon way is. I've actually taken the sweat and labor to actually think, okay, how can I multiply this for other people? How can I create this for other people? How can I help other people create these type of worlds to live in? So the Solomon way is just that. And I actually, this is my heart to actually just give this book to your listeners. I would love to just have every single one of your listeners diving into it, into the nuts and bolts, and actually changing the rules they play with, and realizing, it's time to actually take control. It's time to step up and be a king or a queen over their investments. It's time to actually own the domain that God's given them. And, hey, Curtis, it's so funny. I have people often who are like, man, I don't fully agree with your spiritual beliefs, but I'm going to invest all my money with you. Just in case there is a God, I want his wisdom to protect my investments.
That's right.
So, this is not like a religious pitch. This is the thing of like, man, everyone needs wisdom. Like we
Right.
want wisdom to actually run and flow like a river over our investments, because we know that we've seen people who have lost everything. So we want to like multiply and gain. So this is what I want to do. I want to actually give the book away free to your listeners. You can go on Amazon and actually go buy it, obviously, but I want to actually give it away to you guys. And I'll cover the actual cost of the book. I'll cover everything putting the book together. All I ask for you to do is just cover the shipping, and I just want to give it to you. It's my blessing. So pull out your cell phones, and what I want you to do is I want you to text me. So pull out your cell phone, and you're going to text the phone number is going to be 31996, 31996, and you're going to text the word Solomon Way. What's going to happen is it's going to pop up and it's going to show you a link, and you're going to click that link, and that's going to take you straight into getting the book. And so, and I apologize, it's not Solomon Way, it's Solomon. So you're going to text the word Solomon. So you're
Solomon. Okay.
So 31996, and you're going to text the word Solomon, and a link will pop up. You click that link, it'll take you right through the process to have the book shipped to you. And I am so excited, man. I really want to hear from your listeners, so if they can reach out. They can reach out on social media. They can reach out through the book. There's different ways to contact me, but I would love to see your people taking massive action. Turning their net worthless, investments into what we call activated control, where you take control over your investments and you start exponentially growing wealth. And it's truly easier now than it ever has been before to have what we call Solomon investor investments. You just got to know the pathway. You just got to know what it takes to be a Solomon investor. And I lay everything out in the book for you.
Wow, that's great. So we will put all of this in the show notes. In case you didn't get it, if you look at the show notes, I'll have the text 31996 to Solomon, and the message is in Solomon, and that will get you the link. And we'll have your we'll put out there your. What's the other ways to get in contact with you? You have a website. They want to follow you. How do they do that?
Our website is boroncap.com. So like Boron Capital, but just Boron, BORON, C as in cat, CAP. So boroncap.com. We have a whole back end on our website where you can go through the due diligence of our properties. So you can sign up for a free account. You can go do due diligence on our properties. You can see the investments that you'd be investing into. You can go start gaining education on how we do Solomon investments, how you can go see the back. Oh man, some lot of good nuggets. And also, also when you text 31996 to the word Solomon, and you put that in the message, when you text that, I'll start giving you different things that will be key components like flow charts and worksheets that'll actually help you walk out the Solomon investment. So, man, I'm excited for you guys. This is so good. I just wish someone would have done this for me, 14 years ago. I can't imagine where I would be if I just knew ahead of time, how to get the wisdom. Like I lay out all the wisdom of Solomon inside the book, The Solomon Way. That's one of the biggest things is everyone's like, well, how do you even get it? Like, how do you get it imparted inside of you? How do you walk it out? How do you know which investments he would choose? And how do you actually not lose money on? How do you actually build wealth and gain territory? And, Solomon was really big about massive territory. He grew territory It wasn't about like, I got 200 doors, I got 300 doors. No, he was territorial. He owned the domain he walked into. He reigned over other kings. Other kings paid him tribute. So this is where we're going with our investments. We're going big, and the bigger you think, the more wisdom you need. So I'm excited for you guys.
I hate Los Alamos was a boss. I haven't even looked at him like that. I would go back in the Old Testament.
Oh my goodness,
that.
bro!
So
he owned more land, more real estate, more construction. You got to read the book, The Psalm Away, bro. You got to get.
Listen.
Obviously, I'm gonna get you your book for free too. So
we appreciate that. So our leaders are readers. So you want to go out, you want to keep expanding your knowledge. Blake, listen, I appreciate the offer. We're going to get the get everybody. Y'all hear this? You get a free book. So just pay for the shipping, get the book, check out his information. I also have his YouTube channel. I have the stuff. We'll put it in the show notes. And any final closing thoughts for us, Blake? So we take us home.
Yeah, I think it's this, my man. It's time now to change the whole entire way your trajectory works. Like, you were a queen or a king in the king's court. Like, it's time now. I don't care if you got a little bit of money or you got a lot of money. It's time now to activate. It's time to take control. It's time to actually walk it out, because I'm telling you, 10 years from now, you'll be so much happier that you actually took a stand and cleaned out all the bad voices and said, you know what? I'm actually going to steward my money right. I'm going to take authority and actually steward my money God's way. And I promise you, you'll never be the same.
All right. I like it. So activated control. We're going to end with that. Blake, I want to thank you for coming on to the Practical Wealth Show and dropping some serious knowledge on my listeners. And so we look forward to checking out the book next week. And hey, everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of the Practical Wealth Show. Make sure you listen, like, and share. Thanks, Blake.
Hey, blessings on you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Practical Wealth. To access the show notes and resources, go to practicalwealthshow.com. To get your questions on the show, go to practicalwealthshow.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any investment decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Practical Wealth. Written permission must be granted before